Hey YouTube, time itself here taking a look at the new Criminal Activity DLC for Battlefield Hardline. It includes two new types of ammunition. The first, for shotguns, is a breaching round. The point of these is to trigger the destructible elements on the map, notably doors, so that if there's a sabotage on the other side of the door, you're not caught by its explosion when you open it. Instead, just blow the entire door down with a breaching round. You need to specifically select the breaching round, otherwise you're still using buckshot, which still can do destructive damage, right here. It uses the standard change fire mode button down on the D-pad for the Xbox, and you'll see the icon change from the regular bullet to a shell. The shell is your breaching round, but after firing it, it immediately switches back to buckshot. You'll need to reselect the breaching round every time you want to fire one. In searching YouTube, you will find videos where people don't understand this and think they're doing something with breaching rounds just because they're selected in their loadout when they're not actually using them, and instead you're just seeing buckshot. Note that the range you get that explosive effect for the destruction is somewhat limited. However, using Synthic.com's GameFile data browser, if I'm interpreting the data files correctly, which is entirely possible that I'm not, there is both the explosive effect, which is destructive to the environment, and then basically a completely separate, still fairly buckshot effect. The explosive damage probably isn't what actually damages infantry. That explosive effect is useful for destruction, but it's not useful against armored vehicles, and in fact, the regular fire mode is more effective against vehicles than the breaching round. And what seems like the non-explosive damage doesn't appear to have much more range than the explosive damage I just showed. So it really is only for environmental destruction and knocking vehicles around a bit on the road. But it's going to take a bunch of work to figure out what's exactly going on against infantry, and you're only going to get the breaching round when you specifically want it. So the question is mostly, do you want to give up whatever other attachment you might run on your shotguns in order to have breaching rounds as an available option? I really like the tack light on my shotguns, but maybe you don't think it's necessary, in which case, by all means, run breaching rounds and just have that option available. AP tracer rounds look like they're supposed to just be a counter to the mechanic's armored insert for assault rifles, carbines, battle rifles, and DMRs. I have not figured out how to read the body multipliers in the data browser yet, so I'm just gonna guess that they're a direct counter. I don't know what else they would be, which in the right scenarios can be very useful. However, there are some downsides. The first is the very obvious tracer effect giving away your position. So you can mark flash hider and tracer rounds as a stupid attachment combination. But for assault rifles and carbines, there is another downside. It lowers the maximum damage from 28 or 25 to 24, except for the RO933, which it doesn't change because the RO933 is already terrible. And the AKM, which, like the battle rifles and DMRs, it doesn't do anything to. So that takes those guns from normally 4 hit kills to 5. It probably hurts the assault rifles the most, the M16, the 416, and the ARM. The 25 base damage guns, well, if you hit an extremity, they were already 5 hit kills. It's not a huge change. Because the AP tracer rounds don't change minimum damage or the damage drop-off ranges, the Kar 556 probably comes out fairly well in all this. It has such a short maximum damage range. And by that same logic, the AKS-74U shouldn't be hurt too badly by using this because its maximum damage range isn't very far. Of course, it does start out with that great maximum 28 damage, and so against most targets you're going to hit 4 hit kills at fairly close range with that gun. I have a feeling players are going to either really like or really dislike running tracer rounds on the 74U. It's that whole metagame counter thing where it's situational. I'm not a fan of this system because it requires you to give up something, in this case it's only an accessory slot, in order to counter something that the other players have to specifically equip. I don't like when Call of Duty does this shit. I'm not going to like it in Battlefield. Whether or not I consider the armored insert overpowered is sort of beside the point. I don't like this method of balancing. It's the sort of something's perfectly imbalanced. You've got this one great thing, but this other thing that counters it, absolutely just destroys it, makes it worthless. I would rather avoid the explicitly situational use of that counter. So AP tracer rounds not necessarily the best choice for the operator class, but if you've got an open accessory slot as a battle rifle or DMR user, go ahead and consider using them. The KSG makes an appearance as a shotgun. Rate of fire is fairly high at 109 rounds per minute, though it is very easy to oversample it and not be able to get that higher rate of fire. For comparison, the Stakeout's about 115 and the 870 is about 83. In order to balance things, the KSG fires fewer pellets per shot, but it has a fairly tight default choke, tighter than the Stakeout, which fires more pellets. While they are different, it seems a bit odd that the cops get both the KSG and the Stakeout. Oh, and the criminals didn't get a new shotgun in this DLC. That's just odd. I don't know what's going on there. At this point, I really need to do a proper shotgun roundup video with testing and stats and all that good stuff. But that will have to wait for another day. For now, if you're using the KSG, it seems okay. Mostly just really try and work on getting comfortable with the rate of fire to make the best use of it. I think shotguns may have been buffed in the criminal activity patch. If you haven't tried them since the patch came out, go ahead and give them another go, especially that Stakeout. If you're wondering how the KSG feels, it's going to be somewhere between the Stakeout and the 870. It's kind of a weird cross between the two. And thankfully also the criminal activity patch seems to have fixed the delayed shotgun kills that just resulted in just bizarre and absurd kill trades. So that's great. Shotguns now sensible. Might run around and have a little fun with them. I've already done a battle rifle roundup, and if you watched it, you know my conclusion was basically I use these guns in semi-auto unless I'm just really pressed into close range combat. Now the two new battle rifles, the FAL and SG510, both have fairly high rates of fire. But that doesn't matter because normally I'm in semi-auto mode, and at that point they might as well pretty much just be the same as every other battle rifle. It just means having to unlock more attachments for them to make them work the way I want them to. Yes, there are some slightly different statistics from the other battle rifles. If you want to dig into the files or check out synthic.com, you can see those. I just don't really care. On to the new maps. First up, The Beat. You might recognize this from one of the early levels in the campaign. It's a night map centered around a small apartment complex. This one largely follows the theme of a lot of the other Hardline maps, having a central structure in the middle of the map with lots of stories and lots of routes in and out and every which way, and you go to if you want to maybe find some people, but you surely want to die because you're not going to stay in that area very long and stay alive. I'm just not a fan of all the multiple levels and stairwells and those railings that you can kind of see through but not quite, and your bullets should normally go through but don't seem to nearly as often as you wish they would. I'm really not a fan of night maps, just not my thing. I'd rather have enemies be much more visible than worrying about trying to hide in the shadows myself. In Battlefield, that means spamming the spot button a lot and looking to start shooting at Doritos. Now this map also has a lot of smoke and particle effects. In the end, I just threw on an infrared sight, especially the 2x FLIR sight that I really like for my battle rifles, and just started going to town. It felt like cheating. Picking out enemy players at night through the smoke across the map and landing accurate fire. Yeah. Code Blue felt like another very typical Hardline map, and like The Beat, is night, which I don't enjoy, though visibility is a bit better. There's the central structure where you could go inside if you wanted just to have more corners than you could ever hope to check, or you could work your way around the outside, which is fairly nondescript, especially with all these straight streets. A lot of maps end up feeling much like one another. I guess the most notable thing is that there are 3 rooftops, the club, and then a building on either side where you can get up on the roof and try and snipe back and forth. Though I guess it's more like the rooftop on the club is the central location, and the other 2 are mostly just counter positions. Though they're also where some the conquest points spawn, and I'm guessing some stuff for other objectives. But there were points where I found it extremely hard to run around at street level, just because there's a sniper up on the roof. I can't get across the street because he'll kill me, and even moving around in the shops on the side of the street I'm currently on doesn't offer me enough cover to really move around and try and do much of anything. Mostly just have to wait for a teammate to get in position and deal with that sniper and his buddies. Despite a fair amount of time spent on Black Friday, I still don't have a very good feel for it. Right now, I'd say it feels like a better version of Operation Locker. Mostly interior with lots of stairwells, narrow quarters, and routes crossing from one side to the other. Like modern shopping malls, it can be a bit nondescript and it's easy to lose your way. There's just no long lines of sight with some central reference point to take your bearings from. Instead, you just kind of gotta work off the map and remember which way you're going. Fortunately, this map manages to focus on close quarters combat without running into a lot of the problems that Battlefield 3's Close Quarters DLC had, where there were just rooms every which way, flanking routes, multiple levels, and you really couldn't keep track of anything. Right now, it seems like they have the appropriate number and length of flanking routes and cover to move around the various positions while still offering long enough lines of sight that not everything is just a shotgun or SMG battle. And finally, as a counterpoint really to the close quarters mall that Black Friday is, we have a logging camp in Backwoods. This is a fantastic change of pace from most of the rest of the maps in the game. And I'm going to call it right now, this one's going to become a fan favorite. Sure, everyone's initial impression is, oh, I'm gonna snipe on this map, and actually that's exactly what I did, so I could finish off the marksman coins to get my 300 knockout, which only took a couple games, and I actually rather enjoyed. But at the same time, while it encourages that long-range combat, there's enough terrain, rocks, little buildings, fences, and trees everywhere to actually give the map something really interesting and let you work around, get in a little closer if that's what you want to do. So my assessment of the map so far, I'm not a fan of the beat. Code Blue might be a little better, Black Friday seems okay, and Backwoods is fantastic. On these new maps, we have a new battle pickup weapon, the nail gun. Yes, it's a bit of a joke, but close range it seems perfectly effective. It's a semi-automatic, close-range 2-hit kill. However, it's got significant damage and ballistic drop as you start pushing the range out. How would I put it? Close range, it's a bit more effective than the Enforcer's sidearms. Things like the 45T or the 1911, just because those handguns turn into 3-hit kills when you're basically out of melee range. So it's a situationally effective joke weapon, better than trying to get kills with a skid loader, right? Bounty Hunter, which most players will recognize as kill confirmed from Call of Duty, is, well, it's the same thing it is in Call of Duty. It's an attempt to mess up the spawns as much and as fast as possible. So of course they put 64 players on the maps to do this. Especially on the night maps where it's just a little easier to sneak around, there ends up being a lot of interrogating and spawn interrogating. Fortunately, unlike Call of Duty, it doesn't look like you can only have one coin out at a time. That is, when someone dies, they drop a coin, and then when they respawn and die again, they drop another coin, and the first coin is still there unless someone's picked it up. In my experience, pretty much everyone ends up running around like crazy, twitching, and if you actually want to run in and get a coin, you better switch to your secondary so you can outrun the guy next to you. It seems like this game mode is mostly just about the twitch reflexes, aim, and running around like crazy. Some people may try and slow things down, control an area, or maybe even camp a little bit, but with the crazy spawns, that's not always terribly practical. My prediction is that long-term, either Team Deathmatch or Bounty Hunter will be what's played on these new maps, and only one of those two. This is just the weird thing Battlefield does with their DLC packs. When they include a new game mode, it's only on those new maps, and a lot of them are pretty much just throwaway game modes and often end up dying. And with this intended for 64 players, and probably why people will want to play it is just for that absolute crazy running around Twitch shooting experience, getting more than one server in a region populated could prove very difficult. Okay, you've got one going and people will always join that one, but once you fill that up, getting a second one going can be very difficult, and you can't just split the first one in half to 32 players and have it grow from there. For now, players are trying it out, getting a feel for things, finishing their challenges and bounties and coins and all that stuff, and so it's fairly easy to find a game that's well populated. One of the new gadgets for the Enforcer is a pair of tactical gloves that speeds interaction speed with objectives. Normally this really is not a big deal. You arm explosive fasters in Heist, I think it speeds untying hostages in Rescue, but not many people play Rescue. But the big one is speeding how fast you take money from a money pile in Blood Money. When you're taking money from the central pile, it's nice, but where it just is ridiculous at times is when you're taking money from the enemy vault. It's fairly common to get a bunch of teammates on the central pile, get more teammates so you get money faster anyway, and then get lots of Molotovs or incendiary grenades and gas going every which way at all the entrances, and cover yourselves while you pick up the money. So being a little faster there it's nice, but it's not a huge game changer. It's when you're at the enemy vault with only 1 or 2 players, and every second counts, that when you're grabbing cash and shove it in your bag as fast as possible, those gloves are really possibly overpowered. So my team at times has done things like put a spawn beacon down at the enemy vault, and on Hollywood Heights, you just grab the money and then jump off the map with their money and respawn and repeat, and you just empty out their vault that way. I won't say that everyone on your team needs to be running Enforcer with these gloves, but if you've got a couple people who are going to the enemy vault, these are really nice to have. Part of the reason is that, well, it's blood money, and so one of the smart things to often do is to not go to the money pile yourself, let someone else pick up the money, kill them, and then take their money off the ground, which doesn't involve any pickup time at all. One thing that I really appreciate is that unlocking the new weapons does not require completing some ridiculous assignments, or any assignments at all. I buy the weapons, and then I can play with them. But for players who want that challenge, that sense of fulfillment for completing a difficult assignment, there are some patches and masks, or, well, for cops it's not quite masks, but helmets that fulfill that role. Unlike the Dino and Wolf masks, where wearing them was just about looking cool and that was it, just telling everybody, hey look, I can use a gadget slot so that you know for sure that I have spent a ton of time in this game. Now there is an actual in-game benefit, though it's not towards winning that actual game, it's just rep increases, which if you've already put a ton of time into the game, why do you need more XP or cash or whatever? The bonuses aren't even that large, like 10 to 20% depending on which one it is. I'm not sure which one I find worse, running around with the old masks where it was just about looking cool and telling everyone, hey, I can use a gadget slot so that everybody knows I've spent a ton of time in this game. Or now it's, hey look, I finished some crazy assignments and I want some XP rather than a gadget that's going to help win the game. I will say this, at least they fit with the theme. For the most part, finding games on the Criminal Activity DLC maps the day or week of release in North America, finding a North American server in prime time for North America has been reasonably easy. Conquest Large, Blood Money, Bounty Hunter, all of those seem to be going strong. The one I had problems though, and that kind of disappoints me, is that I had a lot of problems filling out a heist server for Criminal Activity. Prime time on release day, I was playing a lot of 8v8 heist. The best I think it ever got up to was 12v12, but it quickly dropped back down below that. I think I played for at least 2 hours. We went through the entire rotation of maps twice, but at some point you just get tired of playing the same people over and over and over again. But without any more servers at all in the US, that's what it came down to. I'm okay with the other game modes, there's nothing wrong with them, but heist is my favorite for Hardline. As with all Battlefield DLCs, making sure the new DLC maps get into a regular rotation on most servers so you can actually play them is kinda sketchy. Just gonna have to wait and see how things turn out. I personally went ahead and bought them because all the friends that I'm regularly playing Hardline with, and I'm playing quite a bit of Hardline, already had the new Criminal Activity DLC. Either they got premium, or they just went ahead and picked it up on its own like I did. And I wasn't going to make it a choice between playing with me or playing on the new maps. And plus, if all my friends already have them, that means that I'm probably going to get to play on them too, so that's okay. I am rather amused that anyone would think picking up premium just for Criminal Activity was at all worth it. At some level, if people want to actually play this content, to even just try it out, they have to convince other people to buy it so they have people to play with. I'm speaking of the community at large here, where on PC, PS3, and 360, the player counts are dropping rather concerningly, and if you're actually going to get to play on this DLC, it's probably going to be right after the premium release or right after the regular content release. But Xbox One and PlayStation 4 are still rolling along just fine. Is the game dead on those first 3 platforms? Well, maybe, only time will tell. I was amazed how well Battlefield 4 did given all the shit DICE put their players through. We spent basically a year beta testing that game, from the very beginning of October when the first beta came out, to the end of September when the game was finally where it should have been at for release. That players were even still around at that point is incredible. So I wouldn't count a Battlefield game out yet. Overall, I'd say this DLC is okay, nothing wrong with it, not really a big fan of the 2 night maps. Pick it up if Backwoods looks like something that'd be fun to you and you really want to get your sniping on. Not that you should only snipe, you should definitely PTFO. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, hope this review was useful, and I will see you next time.